They called her a burden, a punishment, and a shame to her family. So they handed her off to a poor farmer as if she were nothing more than a curse. What no one knew was that this poor farmer had built an empire of thousands of acres, waiting for the day someone would see the beauty in brokenness. And when the obese, unwanted girl entered his world, life, for both of them, would never be the same again. Maria had never asked to be born different. From the time she could walk, whispers followed her. She was bigger than the other girls, heavier, slower in some things, but her heart beat with the same dreams. She wanted to laugh with friends, walk in the sunshine without shame, and maybe, just maybe, fall in love one day. But the world around her was cruel. In her wealthy household, appearances were everything. Her father was a respected businessman, her mother a socialite who lived for reputation, and her brothers sharp-tongued critics who saw Maria as a disgrace to their image. When proposals for marriage came for her sisters, Maria was left out of the conversation. Suitors who accidentally glanced her way would look again at her figure, at her round face, and retreat with awkward excuses. Her family had no intention of protecting her dignity. Instead, they grew harsher with time. "She's eating away our respect just like she eats our food," her mother spat one evening after another rejection. Maria lowered her head, swallowing tears, but inside her chest something cracked. Her family's disgust reached a breaking point when her father's business partner made a remark at a party: "How do you expect to be taken seriously when your daughter looks like that?" Shamed beyond bearing, her father made a decision. Maria would be given away. He called it a solution, a punishment, and an end to the embarrassment. The next morning, Maria was told she would be married off, to a poor farmer from a distant village. No dowry, no celebration, no blessing. She would simply be handed over like damaged goods. Her mother sneered as she packed a small trunk of worn clothes. "At least now we won't have to feed you anymore." Maria's heart shattered, but she said nothing. She was too tired to fight for a place where she was never wanted. When the day came, they pushed her into an old carriage, and with nothing more than a few bundles and bitter tears, she was driven away. She didn't know the man she was being given to. She only knew one thing: to her family, she was gone for good, erased like a stain on their name. And as the wheels rattled on the dirt road, Maria whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the end. Or maybe, it's the beginning." When Maria arrived at the village, she expected rough poverty, cracked walls, and a man hardened by toil. What she saw stunned her. A tall, broad-shouldered man with sun-browned skin and clear, steady eyes greeted her at the gate of a modest farmhouse. His clothes were simple, his hands calloused, but there was no mockery in his expression. His name was David. He looked at Maria not with pity, not with disgust, but with calm curiosity, as if he wanted to know her story. Maria lowered her gaze, expecting the humiliation she had grown used to. She waited for his scorn. But David simply nodded and said, "You must be tired. Come in." His voice carried neither judgment nor disdain, only a quiet strength that Maria didn't know how to process. Inside the farmhouse, the furniture was plain but clean. A warm fire burned in the hearth, and bread baked in the oven. Maria's stomach tightened with hunger, but her shame made her push the feeling away. She sat silently as David set a plate before her. "Eat," he said gently. "No one should go hungry under my roof." Maria hesitated, glancing at him nervously. "Aren't you angry? They forced me on you like a punishment." David looked at her for a long moment before replying. "People don't define my blessings or my burdens. I decide that." His words struck her like a lightning bolt. For the first time in her life, someone hadn't treated her as less. The days that followed were strange for Maria. She helped with small tasks, though she was clumsy at first. She tended to chickens, learned to knead dough, and followed David to the fields. He worked tirelessly, but with a quiet patience that soothed her. Unlike her family, he never criticized her body or mocked her movements. He taught her how to guide the oxen, how to sow seeds, and how to recognize when rain was coming just by looking at the sky. One evening, as they stood together watching the sun dip behind golden fields, Maria finally asked, "Why don't you treat me like them?" David turned his head slowly. "Because you're not them. You're you. And I see more in you than they ever cared to look for." Maria's chest tightened with a warmth she didn't understand. For the first time, the word home began to feel real. Weeks turned into months, and Maria found herself growing stronger. Her body still carried its weight, but in the fields, she learned it was not a curse. She could lift, carry, and work alongside David without feeling ashamed. Yet, one mystery gnawed at her. For a man called a poor farmer, David seemed different. His field stretched farther than the eye could see, neatly tilled and fertile. He hired workers from the village during harvest, paying them fairly. Merchants came often, bringing respect and deference when they spoke to him. One day, Maria stumbled across a locked barn at the far edge of the property. Through the cracks, she glimpsed shiny farming equipment that looked far too expensive for a poor man. Confusion grew inside her. Finally, she gathered courage and asked him one evening as they sat by the fire, "David, why do people call you poor when I can see you're not?" David smiled faintly, his gaze steady. "Because wealth doesn't always need to be announced. And power is greater when it's hidden." He paused, then leaned back in his chair. "Maria, I own more land than anyone in this county, thousands of acres. I've built it quietly, while everyone else chased titles and attention. Let them call me poor. Their blindness protects me." Maria's eyes widened, her breath caught. All along, the man she thought was a simple farmer was one of the wealthiest landowners in the region. "But, why me?" she whispered. "Why accept me when you could have married anyone?" David looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Because I wanted someone real. Not a woman who wanted my land or my money. Someone who understood struggle. Someone who would see me, not just what I owned." Maria felt tears rise. For the first time, she understood, he had chosen her not in spite of who she was, but because of it. And that night, as the stars stretched endless above them, Maria dared to believe she was not a punishment, but perhaps, a blessing. Years later, Maria's family would hear of her again, but not as the shameful burden they once discarded. They would hear her name whispered in business circles, spoken with awe by farmers and merchants alike. Maria, the obese daughter they had given away as a punishment, was now the wife of David, the man who quietly controlled thousands of acres and employed hundreds of families. But more than that, Maria had grown into herself. Under David's care, she had discovered strength, resilience, and grace. She walked the fields with confidence, guided workers with kindness, and oversaw community projects that changed lives. The villagers respected her not for her size, not for her beauty, but for her heart. When her parents finally tried to reach out, arriving one day at the estate with nervous smiles and false apologies, Maria met them at the grand doorway. Dressed in simple clothes but carrying the authority of a queen, she looked at the people who had once cast her away. "You gave me away because you thought I was your shame," she said softly. "But it turns out, I was your greatest loss." They left in silence, their pride crumbling. As Maria turned back toward the home she had built with David, she smiled. She was no longer the unwanted daughter. She was a woman who had turned punishment into power, shame into strength, rejection into love. And as she walked the land that stretched for miles under the golden sun, Maria knew the truth at last: she had never been a burden. She had always been enough. Maria's story teaches us that no one is a burden. Sometimes what the world calls punishment is really a blessing in disguise. Never let others decide your worth. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes for more life-changing stories. And remember, kindness can transform destinies.